Good afternoon. My name's Edward Hughes. I'm the president of the Harvard Business School Club of San Diego. Welcome to our CEO Forum. I've just got a couple of quick things to talk about before I introduce our esteemed guest. Thank you again for our sponsors, Hughes Marino, KPMG, Latham Watkins, and the Honor Foundation and CEO Coaching. Our mission as a club is to continue to educate leaders who make a difference in the world and make San Diego a great place to live and work. And we do that through three core activities. Firstly is our CEO Forum programming, which we're going to do one today. And second is our management development program. For the last 10 or so years, we've had the opportunity to do two programs, a for-profit program in the fall and a not-for-profit program in the spring. We're just in the process of wrapping up our not-for-profit program. It's gone absolutely terrifically. We're very excited to see all those leaders in these nonprofit organizations get a little slice of HBS here in San Diego. And the third part is the social enterprise initiative. As I say, we do a not-for-profit program, which is part of educating the management teams here in San Diego. But we also run a program where we have fellowships, social enterprise fellowships, for the Strategic Perspectives in Nonprofit Management course at Harvard Business School. And that takes place each year in July timeframe. I think now we send over 50 leaders to this program, and it's had an immense amount of positive feedback and impact on these organizations here in San Diego. Currently, we are taking applications through to the end of March, so March 31st is the cutoff date. So if you are part of a nonprofit organization and you feel that the leader could participate and benefit from such a program, please have a look at our website. As I say, we're taking applications through the end of the month. It is a fully funded scholarship. We pay the tuition as well as the travel for that as well. So it really has a terrific impact on the organization. So highly encourage people to do that. And then my final slide is that today's format is going to be in a webinar. It's a fireside chat. We do want audience participation in the form of questions. So please type your questions into the chat box, and I'll try and answer and get as many of those as I can during the time frame. So with that, let me stop sharing this, and I'm going to introduce our guest, Paul Walsh. Paul, welcome back. It's good to see you again.
Thank you, Ed.
So I had the opportunity to do a interview with Paul back in November of 2024. And as you know, he's the executive chairman of McLaren, the luxury automotive and motorsport and technology company. And McLaren was on the way up, doing fantastically well. And we can talk about how well they've done since and why obviously we invited Paul back. But I've known Paul now for 30 plus years. My first job out of Harvard was a company called Pillsbury. And I joined as a director of strategy to help with the team there. And Paul was the CEO. He was, that was about a $6 billion organization. Parent company was a company called Grand Metropolitan at the time and then became Diageo. He went on to become the CEO of Diageo, which is the world's largest drinks company, and ran that very successfully for about 13 years. After that, became chairman of the Compass Group. And then in 2020, he became the executive chairman of McLaren. So Paul's got phenomenal international experience. He's also been a longtime director of FedEx and McDonald's Corporation. So I'm super excited to have Paul back. And as I say, it's November 2024. Probably seems like a lifetime ago for you, because I mean, in the business you're in now, things move pretty fast. But tell us, at the time you were leading the constructors championship, etc., and then last year you went on to win the constructors championship and the drivers championship. So tell us a bit about that. That's got to have been just fantastically fun.
Yeah, I mean, to win the constructors, basically, you've got to have two cars that perform. And we had that in 24, but we didn't actually get the drivers. But in 25, for the large parts of the season, both Oscar and Lando were sort of in the hunt together. So, yeah, we sealed up the constructors quite with 6 races to go. Lando took a bit longer. We had one disqualification because of ride height on the car, a millimeter out of spec. So it went down to the wire to the last race in Abu Dhabi. So that was nail biting to say the least. But obviously delighted for both drivers. They both did very well. And to get two consecutive constructors is quite an accolade. And, it's interesting. I think if you ask a non aficionado of Formula One, name a team. The first team they mention is Ferrari. The second team is usually McLaren. But Ferrari haven't won a constructors for 18 years. So, it shows the importance for the brand to have a winning record. They've had drivers, but they haven't had a constructors. So, and what does it mean for us? It means more prize money and it means better rate card for sponsors. So it massively improves the economics of the venture.
So do you think when you became executive chairman back in 2020, how was McLaren, the F1 team, doing?
We'd started to improve reliability. We'd moved from probably middle of the grid to fourth, but it really accelerated, as you correctly pointed out, in 24 and 25.
What do you attribute that to? Because I mean, everybody's, trying to hire the best engineers, everybody's trying to hire the best drivers, right? I mean, this is a big, big money sport. So, but you guys have had this just phenomenal rise. I mean, you think back, what do you think the two or three big moves that you made were, or that McLaren made that enabled you to come from the middle of the grid to the front of the grid?
Well, the first one is people, and I'll speak a bit more about that in a moment. And the other one was investment. And we are very fortunate that we've got very good shareholders who've supported uh, our projects. We spent an awful lot on a new wind tunnel, state-of-the-art wind tunnel, which, by the way, other teams had well in advance of us. And we've also spent a lot of money on CFD, computer fluid design. Then you've got to get the people who know how to operate these very sophisticated pieces of kit. But that goes back to the people issue. We've changed virtually all of the leadership in both divisions. And I know it's a statement of the blindingly obvious, but people do make a difference. If you have people who accept a level of mediocrity, you will get mediocrity. You have to have people who are relentless in the pursuit of excellence. Now, what does that mean specifically on racing, as that was the theme that you started on, Ed? It means, first of all, mindset. They've got to want to win. Coming second is being first of the losers. And some people say, well, that's a bit harsh. Yeah, it may be harsh, but it's true. And people say, yeah, but do you want to win at all costs? And I say, yes, as long as it's within the rules. Whatever it takes, we have to pursue. So you need that mindset of winning, a desire to win. It needs to be coupled with the team mentality. And again, that gets spoken about a lot. Let me say a few things about what I mean by that. You need openness. You've got to avoid blame. Blame slows you down, and we can't afford to be slowed down. We have to, if something's not right, as it was not right in China, we've got to work on it to get it right in Japan. That's 2 weeks. And if that means people got to cancel the vacations, they've got to cancel the vacations, whatever it takes, because time is the essence. The other thing is, if you don't have a team mindset and if you don't avoid the blame culture, you just get slowed down, bogged down.
Mhm.
And it creates a culture of concealment. Because if you're going to get blamed and regaled for something you've done wrong, then you're going to do the best you can to put that blame elsewhere in the organization. And too much time and too much friction is created by such an endeavor. So the team principal, Andreas Steller, has got a lovely term. He says, no poison biscuits. You
Mm.
know, when we sit down, we're all in this. We've
Right.
all had a hand in it. And therefore, let's focus on the issue. Let's get it on the table and let's collectively work to fix it. So I think bad news is not like wine. It does not improve with age. You know, the
Okay.
sooner you face up to it, the sooner you can collectively start to address it.
Okay.
So investment, pretty straightforward, but you know, even with uh, very well-funded shareholders, resources are not limitless. So you have to be very clear on the priorities. And strategy for me is all about setting those priorities, particularly when it comes to capital allocation. And so capital, investment, and people.
And now you mentioned the two divisions. So I would imagine your F1 team is super, and you do other racing beyond F1 as well, but super intense. Obviously, you say winning at all costs. And you've had an incredibly successful career, so and I know I've worked for one of your companies. Is the regular automotive division like that as well, or do you have two different cultures kind of going on in McLaren? Because I gotta believe one is super intense and not maybe cutthroat, maybe the wrong word, but it's a win at all costs mentality.
Yeah, I think there are overlaps. I think there are certain things that are different. Um, for example, if you are buying a McLaren sports car, you are looking for obviously the brand image, the performance, the looks. I believe that the cars are automotive pieces of art. You know,
Yeah.
they are beautiful, but they've got to be reliable. So you can't pursue quick fixes. You have to
Okay.
be a bit more steadier on how you deploy your resources and how you go about developing that car. In racing, once we're into the season, if it doesn't work at the first race, then you've got 2 weeks to try and figure out what you're going to do. And if it still doesn't work, you've got another 2 weeks. So it's far more intense. And therefore, I would suggest more experimental.
Okay. Okay. All
But
right. So
the underlying principles are the same.
okay, you got a little bit more of a time frame, obviously, in the automotive business, and then you're really under this time pressure. If you had to describe the culture of the F1 team, how would you describe that at McLaren?
I would say people first. Everybody has to feel part of that team. And I'll give you an example. I think it was in 24, we got the fastest pit stop, which is 1.8 seconds. Now, just think about it. You've got to get four wheels off and
It's
four
mind-boggling.
wheels on in 1.8 seconds. There is a team of two, four, 14 people. It's like choreography. You know, the car gets to a stop, it's jacked up, one at the front, one at the back, wheel off, wheel gun, wheel off, wheel on, wheel gun. Um, so often people say, well, you know, that's a pit stop. It was that pit stop that had actually got us the Constructors' Championship in 2024. Had we been zero point 0.3 seconds slower on the pit stop, we'd have come out behind Ferrari and we would have not won the Constructors. Um, so you've got to make everybody feel part of it: the driver, the engineer, the pit crew, the wheel changer, the wheel gun guy. And when we were celebrating that, because I think celebration is an important part of management, you've got to make people feel good about what they've achieved. Andreas Stella did a wonderful speech. And he started off by saying, I want to thank everybody for their endeavors around securing the championship. He said, and I thought, who do I want to thank? He said, and I then realized I can't single out anybody because if it hadn't been for the pit crew and the driver stopping exactly on the mark, because if he's not on the mark, you got to move that gun. That's a tenth of a second gun. So he stopped on the mark. The team did their job. Then he said, then I thought, well, who provided the capital to develop that wheel gun? The finance people gave us that allocation. So I've got to thank. Then they couldn't have done that if we didn't have our sponsors. I won't drag this out. But by the time he'd finished, every one of 1,200 people, because that's how many people McLaren Racing employ, every one of them felt part.
Wow.
And that's what I mean by, teamwork's an easy term to just throw around. It's how you make everybody feel part of that achievement and part of that team.
And tell us a bit about the celebration you had when you won the drivers and the constructors championship, because I mean that's big time.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously, well, when we won the constructors in Bahrain, everybody who's in Bahrain, sorry, in Abu Dhabi, then flew to Bahrain, and we had a party that went on until the early hours at the Crown Prince's palace. He was very generous. He wanted to recognize people. In 25, we did it in walking because we felt that by doing it that way, certain people weren't at the race. So we had a secondary celebration, which kind of didn't feel, because it was, two stages. It didn't feel right. So we said, no, we appreciate your offer, but we want to do it back at walking. And we got everybody involved. We then had a family day where the drivers were there. People could come and look at the cars. They mingled. Everybody got the shirt and all the rest of it. And there were copious amounts of champagne consumed.
I'm sure that's quite the thing. So tell me about, like as you say, I mean, the guy who does changes the wheel, put the wheel gun, etc., has got to be the best at that he or she is at in the world at doing that kind of stuff. So how do you get this kind of elite talent? Is it you're recruiting a lot and then you're weeding them out, or are you how are you getting the group, because that point one of a second, etc. If the driver stops in the wrong place, he's got to move the gun. I mean, all of those things count.
Yeah, I mean, using that as an example, although it would translate into other departments as well, whether it's engineering, design, wind tunnel, aero, or whatever. We are great believers in data. So if you think on a 1.8-second wheel change, that's as fast as the slowest operator. So we know exactly how long each wheel guy took to get the wheel off. And by the way, these wheels, I would struggle to lift. I
Yeah,
mean,
probably
they're,
60, 70 pounds or
and
something.
also they're cumbersome. It's not easy. They don't have handles on them. So we then share the data. We share it, as I said earlier, not in a blame way, but you'll normally find that if one person is continuously the slowest in the group, they will self-select out. They may self-select by going elsewhere. They may elect to go into another department, put their hands up and say, look, this kind of isn't for me. I'm getting past it, or my fitness isn't what it would need to be. We have physio teams who will work with them to get that fitness how it needs to the level it needs to be.
With the wheel guys, not because I know you do it all with the drivers, but you're talking about
We do that, but also we've got what we call a wellness center in Woking, where we have two doctors on permanent staff. We have, I think, six physios, and it is state of the art. And every employee is welcome to use it. And we have a flexible approach whereby, if you, let's say, 3 o'clock works better for you, then take your break at 3 o'clock rather than your lunch break. Do whatever you need to do. But we encourage you to use it. And equally, if you're not feeling right, we'll make the doctors available to you. We give employees. Have you heard of Whoop? This new sort of
yeah,
yeah.
van.
You all get Whoops, and
Okay.
we encourage you to both learn to use them and listen to them. So yeah, it's everybody.
And how about, I mean, one of the great things about sports is the intensity of it. It's obviously very time bound, etc. But there's enormous pressure, right? I mean, when you won the Constructors' Championship, the team probably felt enormous pressure to go and do it again, right? And the drivers felt like, hey, I've got the best cars now. That's been proven. They're under enormous pressure to win the Drivers' Championship. How does that play out in the organization so that people aren't just cracking under that kind of pressure?
Well, I can't change that. That is what we're dealing with. We can help the situation rather like creating this wellness center, rather like constant communication. Um, but you either embrace that environment or you don't. And
Yep.
some don't. And by the way, there is added intensity because of the travel schedule. You
Right.
know, this weekend coming, we're in Japan. So, and we'll probably at any race between the marketing people, because we'll have sponsors there, and the engineers and the pit crew, we'll probably have 120 people there. So you get back from that race, you may get 2 days off, and then you're back on a plane. It's tough. It's tough. And some people do, as I said earlier, select out of it. They'll say, this isn't for me. I'm an aerodynamicist. I'm going to go back and work for British Aerospace Aircraft Division or whatever. So people do self-select out. And we have continuous feedback. This is not a sort of performance evaluation once a year. The managers are expected to give, routine feedback on how people are doing. And people either rise to it or, as I said, they'll decide that they want to do other things. Now, sometimes those other things are within McLaren. If we've got a phenomenal aerodynamicist who says, I just can't sustain this pace, we may put them on secondment for 6 months and then see if they want to come back. Or they may want to move into the automotive division, whereby things are more paced rather than being always at pace. We'll give them options, but ultimately, that's the cards that were dealt.
Okay. And how much does I teach a HBS case on the Chilean mining rescue. And one of the kind of key learnings and success factors was the politicians basically kind of, isolated the engineers and let them do their job, right? And handle the media and all that kind of stuff. How much do you guys, between yourself and Zach, kind of isolate the team away from all the media pressure so they can focus on what they want to do and kind of like you guys manage that,
Um, as much as we can. If you think on the media side, I don't play much of a role in the media. Zach does, Andrea does, and the drivers.
Yep.
And fundamentally, we do that for two reasons. For the reason you've identified, I don't want any other distractions going on. Also, I don't want to reveal to my competition who my stars are.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want them thinking, oh, Joe or Jill, they sounded good. They seem to know what they're talking about. Let's go and hire them. So I want to
Yeah.
keep that very, very quiet.
Okay. And there does seem to be quite a bit of movement. I mean, we see it as a fan of the sport. I see it at the principal kind of level. Hey, someone's moving to this person, and Adrian knew he's moving over here, etc. So, throughout the ranks, there's quite a bit of poaching of other people's star players. Is that what goes on?
I think it's more so when a team isn't doing well or if there is disharmony within the team.
Okay.
And I think the name you articulated, Adrian, I think it was as much because of Red Bull's disharmony as it
Okay.
was anything else, because Red Bull were doing incredibly well last year.
Yeah.
Um, so, so you have to keep a harmonious environment, and the best way to keep successful people is to be successful.
Okay. So let's talk a bit about the start of this season. And you and I had a quick pre-call on this, and it hasn't gone quite the way you expected. So how?
I would. It certainly hasn't gone the way that I hoped.
Okay.
It has gone pretty much as I expected, with one exception. If you look at the testing that took place in Barcelona and then continued in Bahrain, and I was at the Bahrain tests, the data suggested that there were top four teams. And certain stats you could argue that we were number two, certain stats you'd argue that we were number three. So I was expecting us to have two drivers in the top six. And that's basically what happened in Australia. We had a did not start in China because of a technical issue on the battery, which is very sensitive, so I can't really go into details. We believe we have fixed that, but that was the issue. Now, I believe that our job is a race for development as much as a race for placings in the Grand Prix. We know we've got, and this is tenths of seconds, we know we've got a gap. So we know we've got to pick up 2/10 of a second per lap in the next three races. And we'll see if we can do that.
So I'm sure a lot of our audience isn't quite as familiar with F1 as maybe you and I, and obviously you're intimately involved. Can you just give us a quick overview? What changed from an equipment and a system standpoint? Because you guys finished last year with the two fastest cars, and now you're saying, okay, well, we should be in the top six.
Okay, basically, every 5 years, the regulations around the car in its entirety change. And the reason they do that is it's a bit like golf balls in golf. 15 years ago, you'd have a driver and a six iron into the green. Now it's a driver and a high angled wedge, because the technology of the clubs and the technology of the golf ball has improved so much, but they can't keep making the golf courses longer. It's the same with tracks. You can't keep making them wider, more runoffs to protect the safety standards. So the FIA every 5 years, sorry, I stand corrected, modify the car to basically reduce its performance. And then
Okay.
what we do is we take that car and then over the next 5 years continue to improve it every year to get it back up. And then they'll take us back again. So that's why it happens. Now, in the case of the change in regs for 26, it was a total change. The dimensions were different. The aero was different. The power is different. So before it was, I think, 60% ice, 40% battery. It's now virtually 50-50.
And ICE is internal combustion engine, right?
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
Yep.
So everything changed. The wheel dimensions, everything, the size of the car. Um, and we have a team working on that probably at the beginning of the year, but that means you've got to take them off developing the existing car. So you've got to be pretty mindful about when you make that switch. And because of course there is a cost cap in F1. You can't just spend, 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 which is how it used to be, which is a good thing. It levels the
Is
playing
that
field.
on running the team or on developing the car?
Both,
Okay.
both. There are certain things that are excluded, for example, drivers' salaries, but it's both.
Okay. Okay. All right. So the big changes, and until you got to Barcelona, you didn't know exactly how you're going to stack up in terms of time trials, right? Just it's
Yeah, we'd obviously done a lot of simulation. We are avid users of AI. So yeah, we'd done a lot of work. As I said, coming out of Bahrain, I thought we should be in the top six, and our view is that throughout the season we'll improve that position steadily. The issue is that if Mercedes continue to do very well, then they'll widen the gap to the point whereby we cannot catch them. However, we've got a lot of races to go before that point of no return occurs.
okay. Right. And you had as you said, disappointing China Grand
Yep,
Prix, right?
yep.
Neither vehicle raced, etc. How do you, as the leader, kind of handle that and stay calm and not want to get into the finger pointing and the blame game that you said you don't do? Because, yeah, clearly, I mean, it was a huge disappointment that both cars don't start.
Well, I think it was Rudyard Kipling who had a wonderful in the poem If. He said, if those can keep their head when all around them are losing theirs, you'll be a wise man. So my view is you got to stay calm. You cannot go, oh my God, and start ranting and raving and trying to allocate blame. That is what you can't do. You have to lead by example. And you've got to be very clear on getting the facts on the table. So, as I said, I can't go into the details, but we know exactly what the issue was. We'll find out this weekend whether we fixed it, but it was a battery issue.
Okay. All right. So you're religious about kind of looking at the data and getting the facts on the table. So, um, you said you use a lot of AI. Talk to us about that because obviously most of the people, including myself, are getting into AI and we're bringing it into our businesses, etc. And and F1's usually on the cutting edge of most things. So talk to us what you can about
Well,
what do you use AI for?
in different shapes and forms, we've been using it for quite a number of years. Um, you will see at the races you have a team on the pit wall. I think that's about 6 people. However, all of that information is fed into another 50 people back in walking
Yep.
for each car. So
Okay.
25 people on one car, 25 people on another.
Okay.
And they are constantly running simulations. What happens if the safety car comes out now? What do we do?
Right.
There was one situation last year in Qatar where we should have pulled in and we didn't. Now, people say, well, if you use AI, why didn't you know just to pull in? The reason is that it happened. Oscar was too far. He was too close to the pit lane to turn off and slow down. So,
Okay.
um, so they're running constant simulations. What happens if car X has a failure? What happens if we have a tire puncture? What happens? What happens? What happens? So that they're feeding that back to the pit wall so that decisions can be made in seconds and fractions of seconds. You don't have time to say, hey, Zach, what do you think we should do now?
Hmm.
That's too late.
Yeah.
They've got to know exactly in the circumstance what we're going to do.
Okay. So using AI and running simulations and
So we're
obviously doing it
using
in real
using
time.
that for simulations, and we've been doing that for a while. We're also using it as we strip down engines and rebuild them to look at wear on parts and look at what the probability of failure is. So if you think last year we had an incredibly reliable car, a lot of that was down to a lot of the investment we've made in AI so that we can change out parts well before we get mechanical failures.
Uh,
That's
so,
just two
so
examples.
yeah, so you get using that information kind of real time. You made a comment earlier that bad information or bad news doesn't improve. It's not like wine. Um, can you think back over your career and think about a couple of situations that, or maybe a situation where you could share, like, hey, somebody kept the bad news from you and it ended up being worse than if they just kind of confronted you and said, hey, Paul, I got bad news for you.
Yeah, I'll give you one example, and you may remember it at Pillsbury. We had a product launch, and this is whereby it's not just you got to, truth is like an onion. You've got to go through the layers of truth by constantly asking why. Why? So the answer was, well, we're not getting the uptake on the new products because we haven't got the distribution. Why haven't we got the distribution? Well, chain X and Y haven't accepted it. Why hasn't chain X and Y accepted it? Well, it's because they believe you don't need as many SKUs and flavor proliferations as you put out. Why?
Okay.
They want to limit it to three. So why didn't we just limit it to three? Because that would mean that the other chains would be mightily hacked off because they'd taken all six and chain X had taken three. But what is that telling us? What is that telling us? Maybe we should have only launched three flavors or four flavors with you. So that's a good example of whereby people just dismissed it as poor distribution and will fix it. Whereas in actual fact, had we really drilled down quickly in a non-blaming manner, and in this case, not blaming the customer, the chain purchaser, we'd have got to the facts a lot sooner.
So I think that's the power of the five whys. You keep asking
Why?
until eventually, and I do this with a lot of my clients now because it's like the first response often is something that you're going like, not sure I'm buying that. That doesn't sound like it's a logical decision.
And by the time you get to the fifth why, they're usually looking at you as if you've landed from Mars. Well, I mean, it's so obvious. Well, it isn't, because if it was so obvious, you'd have handled it in the first point.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, no, it's a powerful technique. Um, so let's talk a bit about why is F1 so important to McLaren?
Well, first of all, it's our heritage. We
Yep.
started in Formula One. Bruce McLaren, the founder, that was his dream. He used to race for other teams so that he could build his own racing team. It's a
Okay.
great movie. You may have seen it. Ford versus Ferrari,
Oh, I love that movie.
1966, Le
Yep.
Mans. Well, Bruce raced for Ford,
Yep. All right.
and Ken Miles was a good buddy of his, and ended up doing test racing or test cars until he was tragically killed for Bruce. So that's our heritage. You then have the fact that the car division was basically the successor to racing because we wanted to leverage the brand. Um, and it made perfect sense given the growth in the supercar market. Now, that growth for McLaren somewhat stalled on the automotive side because we didn't have the capital resources to continue to develop the product line rather like Ferrari have. I've got huge admirations for Ferrari. Uh, and they've just come out with the new, we don't call them SUVs, we call them lifestyle vehicles. And it's doing incredibly well. And it's very high margin. I can tell you, with the capital access that we now have, you will see a far broader array of product in 2028 than we currently have. Because at the moment, we're really limited to two-seater sports cars.
So you've got the investment, you've got the on track success now that's driving that. And did the on-track success help you get new investors to raise additional capital, or what? Because I know last time when we spoke about it, you actually corrected me and said like, hey, the F1 team's actually they do make money now, right? But it's not a lot of money. It's not enough to pay for the capital to develop a new car.
By F1 team standards, we are now making good money, far better than when we last spoke.
Good.
But even so, it isn't of the magnitude that you need to run an automotive business. If you want to put a new vehicle into market, you're probably looking at 2 billion in investment.
Well,
I mean, the automotive world has got a voracious appetite for capital. And by the way, one thing I'm very pleased we didn't do is go headlong down the electric route because that has definitely stalled. And yeah, we've got hybrid with the Artura, but pure electric, we won't be touching that for some time.
we talk a bit about that because obviously most of the audience here is going to be, Americans here in the US, and we know obviously the current administration's kind of slowed a lot of the regulatory push down and kind of been somewhat against this. But you sell cars all over the world, so that is translated in the same situation in Europe and as well in the Middle
Very,
East.
very, very much so. You look at the write-offs that some of these large manufacturers have taken.
Okay.
Uh, I don't want to name them, but they're running to billions where they've mothballed factories that were built just to produce electric vehicles. And now I have a particular view, which is my view, which is electric will happen. It is happening, but it has a certain place in the market. Um, Now, a lot of people can't afford two or three or four cars. By the way, some of McLaren owners have got 10 or 20 cars. So what they'll do is they'll use their electric for commuting, particularly when they've got secure charging points, either at their place of work or at home. But if you've got one car or truck, you don't want to be dependent on an infrastructure that is quite underdeveloped in many markets. Um, so that's one of the issues. The other issue from an environmental point of view is that, yes, electricity is probably better than a fossil fuel, but we don't really analyze what happens to the batteries at the end of the life. We haven't taken that environmental impact into consideration. Now, again, I'm not going to name manufacturers, but certain ones in the US, with the windback in regulations, have introduced 6.4 litre V8s into their core line of offerings and are seeing very good sales from them. So that tells you something about what the consumer wants.
The V8 ICE engine is a pretty nice thing. So
Well, I've got to confess, I have a home, as you well know, Ed, in the States, and I've got a V8, and I'm not sure I want to drive it. I just want to turn it on and listen to the sound of it.
it's not quite as loud as your F1 cars, but it's
No,
pretty impressive. Okay, so is it fair to say McLaren dodged the going full electric bullet? You were on the way to do it, and you had to pull that roadmap back, or what happened?
well,
Because everybody was going that way.
maybe because we had to be more disciplined on capital, we
Okay,
couldn't do it anyway. We
okay.
would have we talked to a lot of the major suppliers, and we would have had to homologate a whole new car, which whilst we wouldn't have been putting the capital into the production facility, it's a sizable ticket, and we decided that we would pause on that.
Okay.
The other
All right.
thing is, under many jurisdictions, uh, there are, how can I put it, sort of breaks for low volume manufacturers. And we fall into that category.
Um, and you had a little bit of a shift in the shareholding and the ownership of McLaren relatively recently. Did the F1 team's performance help drive up some of that valuation? I believe the valuations are private, so we probably can't go into the details of that. But But was that a good thing? Because when you swapped out one of your existing owners for a new one, did you get a nice step up in the valuation?
Yes. And how can I put the valuation was fundamentally 5 times what it was in 21.
Oh, nice. Okay. All
And
right. So,
it certainly helped. When you're winning, it's a lot easier than when you're losing.
okay.
So we were far more successful raising capital at the end of 25 than we would have been even 2 years earlier.
I'm assuming it's not because the profitability of the automotive division had gone up by 5x, right?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
this is the sizzle that's created by the race
It
team
is,
on
but I
foot.
go back to a point we touched on earlier. We now have a Formula One team that is profitable and probably it's definitely the best sponsored team on the grid, and its profit is right up there.
Okay. Okay. And you said it's going to cost 2 billion to launch a new vehicle. So
Yeah,
that's the design, the tooling and everything. And
yeah.
you're looking at, I think you called it a lifestyle vehicle, not an SUV.
Hmm.
Okay, so it's going to be $2 billion to launch something like that.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. And by the way, it will be stunning.
Of course. Okay. All right. And we should anticipate that 2028. Is that what you're
28,
thinking?
28.
Okay. And was the raising new capital part of that, giving you that kind of, chunk of that
Yeah,
because you needed to do that?
yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Okay. So it wasn't just a share ownership swap. Someone bought somebody else out. This was now we're putting some more capital into the business.
No, the Abu Dhabi investment, they've already got extensive investments in uh, certain other uh, electric vehicle manufacturers. And we can, without going all electric, we can transfer a lot of that technology.
All right. Okay. All right. And then how do you maintain product quality? Right? Because, I look at the luxury car market and I see some, again, not naming brands, but see some companies out there that have stumbled. Right.
Mm.
So how do you make sure? Because on the one hand, you got this super intense go, go, go race team. On the other hand, you got a big automotive, or automotive division that, you want to put quality product out. And you and I know from our days running brands, etc., one stumble, can create a problem for a brand. So how are you keeping that balanced with the
Well,
need to?
I am being tortured by the model of the car that you have on the shelf behind you. And I suspect that that may be one of the brands you're talking about regarding quality.
Yep.
I don't expect you to comment, but yeah, it's a huge issue. And what happens is you get a reputation for poor quality. That impacts the residual values.
Yep.
And therefore, the price of ownership goes up at a time when the satisfaction around ownership reduces. That's a horrible matrix to be in. So you've got to be absolutely rigorous. Now, we were very fortunate because when we launched the Artura, we were about to launch it, and it wasn't the easiest call that I've had with our shareholders, but all the evidence suggested that it was not ready for the market. So I had to suggest that we delayed it. And some of the cars that we had already manufactured, we just scrapped. It's easy to do that. Well, it's not easy to do it, but it's easier to do it when you're a private company and when you have shareholders who support that philosophy. But I think you ignore quality at your peril. And, I don't want to sort of throw stones because we've had our own quality issues. I believe they are by and large behind us. Uh, but you have to have rigor around that in the same way that in F1 we have rigor around performance. Quality is an important ingredient of performance in automotive.
So let me pull in a couple of questions from the audience, and guys, please type in some more here. So, uh, Have you been able to create a culture that enables two A drivers to compete for the championship, but at the same time promote teamwork? This is a unique strategy as most F1 teams have A driver and a B driver. Yeah, that was coming up a lot before, and people were like, you can't have, these two top drivers, you got to pick one. And I think Toto Wolff was basically out there, the head of Mercedes, saying, yeah, I remember when Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel, I think it was, were doing, we had to pick one or something. So
I think it was actually Nico Rosberg.
you're right, you're right. You're sorry,
Yeah.
of course. Right. So how do you do that? You got two A drivers.
Well, first of all, we've got two very, and I hate to use the word nice, but I'll use it, very nice guys who actually get on. Now, they are racers. So once that flag goes down, once the lights go out and they're racing, they want to win. But it's drilled into them that you do not take each other out. There was one incident last year, I forget which race, but I'll come back to talk about it in a moment. And first of all, you are racing for McLaren and you follow team orders. We know more than you know because we've got the data. Now, once we had secured the constructors with 7 races to go and it was open season, you can do what the hell you want. It's up to you.
Okay.
But equally, do not take each other out. Now, the one incident where people thought, I think it was Lando that crashed when he was trying to make a move on Oscar. It was nothing to do with Oscar. He actually got, and again, it's down to data, as he came around, he got a gust of wind that accelerated him and he overreacted and put it in the wall. So nothing to do with Oscar. That was the only incident. So we've not had any issues around that. There are team principles and team orders that they are well grounded on. And there will be consequences. There will be consequences. I'm not going to go into details on what they are, but they're quite extensive.
Okay. All
And
right.
by the
Next.
way, you don't want to play a team game with McLaren. It's a big grid out there.
Okay. Next question. What guardrails do you put in place so that the win at all costs does not turn into reckless behavior?
Well, I think I've alluded to that around driver behavior. And I want to be clear. We want to follow the rules. We will follow the rules because once you overstep that line, you're facing disqualification. That's not good reputationally. It's not good for points, and our sponsors hate it. So that is a natural guardrail. Equally, if we are playing conservatively and not up to that line, we're leaving performance on the table. So we understand the rules and play to the rules. We're not conservative and we're not aggressive beyond the rules.
Okay. So you push it up to the rule limit. Got it. All right. Next question. How many years out does the strategic plan go, given the amount of sustained investment required? I think it's a great question. I see that a lot now with clients I work with. People are like, should I create a 5-year or 10-year plan? What do you do? You've led a lot of companies.
Yeah, it depends on. Well, first of all, let me give you an observation. Uh, I think too many companies, entities, ventures refer to a strategic plan that is really nothing more than a 3-year budget.
Okay.
And that's not what it's about. I would say on the automotive side, we're looking 10 years out. On the racing side, we're looking 5 years out. And we're looking at, first of all, the scenarios. So we understand now on racing it's exactly what we've got to do in the next 5 years because we've been given the car and we will improve it relentlessly. And the financials are a consequence of us. And obviously we have targets, but it's an output. It's not the input. And similarly with automotive, we've got to be looking at what the worldwide regulations are going to be in 10 years' time. what the consumer instincts are going to be. And bear in mind, nobody needs a McLaren.
Right.
So
It's very nice to have.
we have to work very hard to get people to aspire to own a McLaren. And that starts at a very young age. And that's where F1 is very important. And by the way, one of the great ingredients of success for F1 has been Drive to Survive. That series has been able to recruit a more diverse set of viewers and a much younger set of viewers because it was in danger of becoming a sort of old white guys sport. It is now not. The demographics are very encouraging and continue to improve.
Yeah. How about the F1 movie last year, the Brad Pitt movie, which I loved, right? How did that improve viewership on
Yeah.
F1?
Yes, without any question. And for those who like it, it's because they accept that it is a movie. You know, I cannot, in my wildest dreams, imagine a 52-year-old man getting into a Formula One car and driving it to the level that Brad did. Equally, I can't imagine a driver getting on the grid and not knowing how to start the car. So it's a movie, and it was
Okay.
incredibly entertaining, and it piqued people's interest in the sport. That's fabulous. If we'd have wanted to do a documentary, we'd have done a documentary, but there are enough documentaries on it. It's a movie, and it served its purpose. And by the way, a lot of it was filmed at our headquarters in Woking.
Oh, it
So
was.
that
Okay.
very futuristic building is McLaren's. And I got to meet Brad a couple of times. He's a hell of a nice guy.
He put some time into getting that right because there was a big delay in the production of the movie, right? When there was the Screenwriters Guild strike, I think. So
Yeah.
he spent a year kind
Uh,
of
yeah.
improving his racing skills.
And by the way, I'm not saying he's an F1 driver, but he's a pretty good racer.
Let me ask you on the strategic planning question, because you serve on McDonald's and FedEx, and they're very different industries. Are you seeing an acceleration of things there because of AI? Is that a topic that's kind of constantly coming up, or what are we going to do?
It is. And I think different companies have different views on the impact that it will have on their business. And I'm by no means an expert in AI, but I think a lot are focusing on the cost side of things, how you can eliminate jobs, how you can streamline your audit, how you can do this, that, and the other. But I actually think it's far more than that. And I think the ones who will win will see it as the broad-based tool that it is. But it's certainly at the boardroom level getting a lot of attention.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have an AI strategy now, you are missing the boat, right? I mean, there's
Yeah, and
so
by
much
the way,
potential.
I don't think it's just having a talk shop around AI. I
Yep.
would be encouraging people to look, if you think it's focused on cost, start with cost. You know, at least start to get used to it and comfortable with it. Um, what is the company's policy on chat GPT and things like that? How are you thinking about this? And it's surprising how many companies haven't thought about it.
And I tell a lot of people, you just got to start. You got to start somewhere. It may not be
It's
where you end up, but you got to get going on it. So I know
totally.
we're right up on time. So let me ask you, what are a couple of lessons you would like to share with this group on, you know, building a high performance culture and that winning, right? Which is obviously what you've done in the time at McLaren and the other companies you've been. What a couple of takeaways from your extensive experience?
I think the one that I would focus on, and probably as I look back on my career, is probably where I have failed in the past, is people.
Okay.
It's very easy to exit someone who is obviously not performing or not behaving, or how can I put it? are doing things that are not uh, fiduciarily acceptable. That's
Yep.
easy.
Yeah.
The hard one is when you've got somebody who's really, really trying. They're trying,
Yeah.
but they're just not making it. And
Yeah.
I think as I look back on my career, I've allowed that time period to creep. And I don't believe you can. And I certainly know that in the world of racing, you can't. So that would be one thing I would always ask people to take to heart. The other thing is, I believe with people, and I, even at my ripe old age of 70, I would say you are constantly learning. You are constantly learning. And I look for people who are prepared not to be handed learnings, not to be spoon fed by development courses, but what are you doing to develop yourself? What are
Yep.
you doing? So, I'm no engineer. I've had to invest a lot of time in at least knowing the basics, at
Yep.
least knowing the basics of what McLaren is all about. And I find now that if I don't see that level of receptivity to that need, it tells me something about the individual. If you're not prepared to invest in yourself, why should the company invest in you? So those were the two things.
All right. Great, great words of advice. It's all about the people and getting the right people in the right seats. And most of us have run companies, and you never really regret moving somebody on. You regret that I didn't do it sooner, right? Or get them into the right seat, and then obviously, continue learning, right? So, and that's
The,
what
the
the
other thing,
experience
the other
comes.
thing I say to guys who come and talk to me, and or women, and they'll say, "I think I've got a problem." I said, "By the time you're sharing it with me, you've definitely got a problem."
Yeah. Yeah. So a little bit of self-awareness. Yeah. Good. All
Yeah.
right, Paul. Well, thank you again for your time. This has been fantastic. And again, congratulations on a phenomenal year last year with the drivers and the constructors championship. We're rooting for you. Hopefully, Japan goes well this weekend, and hopefully things get back on track. So it's it's exciting racing. What's going on? There's a lot more overtaking and kind of fun stuff. So it's
And
the
that's the good
product is
part of
good.
it. That's the good part of the regs. You'll also have noticed in China there were quite a lot of cars didn't finish, and that's again part of the regs. That'll all get those bumps will get ironed out, and I think we're in for a good season.
Well, great. Well, thank you again, Paul. I
Right.
appreciate your time. Thank you.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Bye.
Bye.